The grocery cart was half full when my credit card was declined for the third time at Desert Hills Market. Emma tugged at my sleeve, asking why the cashier looked so uncomfortable, while Jake whined about wanting the cereal I'd already put back, on the shelf. The line behind me grew longer as I fumbled through my purse, knowing full well that every card would show the same message: transaction declined. That's when Kevin's voice echoed in my memory from just 2 days earlier, dismissing my late-night computer work with his usual condescending laugh. Lisa's playing store again on her little computer. Waste of time if you ask me, but it keeps her busy while I handle the real money. What Kevin didn't know was that my little computer hobby had generated $47,000 in the past 4 months, sitting safely in a business account he'd never heard of. What Kevin didn't know was that while our family accounts were frozen solid by the IRS, my Desert Bloom Designs business was about to become the only thing standing between our family and complete financial ruin. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The embarrassment at Desert Hills Market wasn't the beginning of our story, though it felt like the moment everything fell apart. To understand how we got there, I need to take you back 18 months earlier to a sweltering July afternoon in our Sunset Ridge neighborhood. The air conditioning had been running nonstop for weeks, and our electric bill was climbing toward $300 again. Kevin was in the garage, polishing his new Ford F-150 that he'd bought without consulting me, explaining to our neighbor, Tom, about the leather seats and premium sound system. I was in the kitchen, trying to stretch our grocery budget while listening to him brag about the truck payment that was eating up nearly $600 of our monthly income. Emma had just turned 11 and was begging for dance lessons that cost $120 a month. Jake needed new cleats for soccer, and the school had sent home another fundraising packet that made me cringe. Kevin's solution to our tight budget was always the same. I needed to be more careful with spending. Cut back on groceries, skip Emma's activities, make Jake's cleats last another season. Never mind that he'd spend $40 on lunch with his sales team twice a week, or that his golf membership cost more than our monthly food budget. That particular afternoon, while Kevin detailed his truck and complained about my spending, I was sitting at our kitchen table with bills spread across the surface like a puzzle I couldn't solve. The mortgage, car payments, insurance, utilities, groceries, kids' expenses. Everything always seemed to need more money than we had, despite Kevin's decent salary at Desert Sun Auto Sales. He made around $65,000 a year selling cars, which should have been enough for our modest ranch house and simple lifestyle, but somehow we were always scraping by. I remember staring at Emma's dance class brochure and feeling that familiar knot in my stomach. 8 years earlier, I'd given up my marketing coordinator position at a mid-sized advertising firm to stay home with the kids. It had made sense then. Daycare costs, Kevin's unpredictable sales schedule, and the demands of 2 young children had made working outside the home feel impossible. Kevin had been supportive initially, proud even, telling people that his wife didn't need to work because he was successful enough to support the family. But somewhere along the way, that pride had transformed into something else. Kevin began talking about my former career as if it had been a cute phase rather than a legitimate profession. When friends asked what I did, he'd smile and say I was a full-time mom, which was true, but he'd add little comments about how I'd tried the corporate world but preferred being home. The way he said it made it sound like I'd failed at working rather than chosen to prioritize our family. The shift had been gradual, so subtle that I hadn't noticed it happening until it was complete. Kevin started making all the financial decisions, without input from me. He'd explain that since he earned the money, he understood it better. When I'd suggest budgeting strategies or question expensive purchases, he'd pat my shoulder and remind me that managing money was more complicated than I realized. After all, I'd been out of the workforce for years now. How could I understand the pressures of earning and managing a real income? That July afternoon, surrounded by bills and listening to Kevin's truck talk, something shifted inside me. Not anger exactly, but a quiet determination that surprised me with its intensity. I opened my laptop, initially intending to research dance class alternatives for Emma, but found myself browsing articles about side hustles and work-from-home opportunities instead. I'd always been crafty, making jewelry as a teenager and creating custom pieces for friends in college. My marketing background had taught me about branding and customer engagement, skills that hadn't disappeared just because I'd been changing diapers and packing school lunches for 8 years. As I scrolled through success stories of people selling handmade items online, a possibility began forming in my mind. The Southwest had always fascinated me. Our move to Phoenix had introduced me to Native American jewelry traditions, turquoise, and silver combinations, leatherwork that reflected the desert landscape. I'd been making pieces for myself and occasionally for friends, but always as gifts or personal projects. What if I could turn this into something more? What if my hobby could become a source of income that Kevin couldn't dismiss or control? That evening, after the kids were asleep and Kevin was watching television, I stayed up researching Etsy, Facebook Marketplace, and Instagram business accounts. I read about product photography, customer service, inventory management, and shipping, logistics. The marketing coordinator in me recognized the strategies, while the creative part of me buzzed with possibilities. Kevin found me at the kitchen table near midnight, laptop open and notebooks covered with sketches and business ideas. He glanced at my screen showing Etsy seller success stories and shook his head with that familiar patronizing smile. Playing around online again? You know that stuff is mostly scams, right? People trying to sell pipe dreams to housewives who think they can get rich quick. I closed the laptop and gathered my notes, not bothering to explain what I'd been researching. Kevin's dismissal stung, but it also strengthened my resolve. I'd spent 8 years allowing him to define my capabilities and worth. Maybe it was time to prove something to myself, regardless of what he thought. The next morning, I drove to the craft supply store with $100 from our household budget, money I'd saved by shopping sales and using coupons for groceries. I bought basic jewelry-making supplies, leather cord, silver-plated findings, and a selection of turquoise beads. When Kevin asked about the bags, I told him I was starting a little hobby project. He barely looked up from his phone. I set up a workspace in our spare bedroom, arranging supplies on a folding table I'd moved from the garage. The room had good natural light from the east-facing window, perfect for the product photography I'd been reading about. I spent Emma and Jake's first week back at school in August learning techniques, practicing designs, and creating my first inventory of pieces. The jewelry felt different from my college attempts. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. 8 years of life experience, of stretching budgets and making things work, had given me an appreciation for quality and durability that I'd lacked as a young woman. These pieces needed to last, to provide value, to justify their cost to women, who, like me, had to consider every purchase carefully. My first Etsy shop listing went live on a Tuesday morning in late August. Desert Bloom Designs, specializing in Southwestern-inspired jewelry and accessories. I'd taken photos with my phone, written careful descriptions, and priced everything conservatively. 1 bracelet, 2 pairs of earrings, and a leather necklace with turquoise pendant. 4 items total, representing hours of work and research. Kevin was at the dealership, the kids were at school, and I was alone in the house when my phone chimed with my first sale notification. A woman in Oregon had purchased the turquoise pendant necklace for $38. After Etsy fees and material costs, I'd made about $22 profit. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Money I'd earned through my own skills and effort, independent of Kevin's sales commissions or opinions. I shipped the package that afternoon, including a handwritten thank you note and a small care instruction card I'd designed on our home printer. The customer left a 5-star review 3 days later, mentioning the quality craftsmanship and beautiful packaging. That review led to my second sale, then my third. September brought steady growth. I was listing new items twice a week, reinvesting profits into better materials and more sophisticated tools. My product photos improved as I learned about lighting and composition. My descriptions became more detailed and compelling as I remembered marketing techniques from my corporate days. Most importantly, I was enjoying the work in a way I hadn't expected. Each piece felt like a small creative challenge, each sale like a personal victory. Kevin remained oblivious to my growing business. He'd see me working on jewelry in the evenings and make comments about my new hobby keeping me occupied. When packages arrived with supplies, I'd explain they were craft materials, which was technically true. When I spent time on the computer, he assumed I was browsing social media or watching videos. The fact that I was managing inventory, responding to customer messages, and developing marketing strategies never occurred to him. By October, Desert Bloom Designs was generating between $800 and $1,200 monthly. I'd opened a separate business checking account using my maiden name, something I could do without Kevin's signature since it wasn't a joint account. Every deposit felt like a small declaration of independence, proof that I hadn't lost my professional abilities during my years at home. The money stayed in the business account, reinvested in better materials, improved packaging, and eventually a proper camera for product photography. I told myself I was building something sustainable rather than just generating quick income. But truthfully, having that financial resource, that secret safety net, gave me a confidence I hadn't felt in years. Emma noticed the change first. "Mom, you seem happier lately," she observed one afternoon while doing homework at the kitchen table. I was packaging orders nearby, carefully wrapping each piece in tissue paper and sealing them with custom stickers I'd designed. "I've been working on some projects that make me feel creative," I told her, which was completely honest. Emma examined one of my bracelets, trying it on and admiring the way the silver caught the light. "You should sell these," she said matter-of-factly. "They're way prettier than the stuff at the mall." I smiled, not telling her that I already was, that her casual validation meant more to me than Kevin's dismissive comments. November marked a turning point. A fashion blogger discovered my shop and featured one of my statement necklaces in a holiday gift guide. Orders flooded in, and I found myself working until midnight to keep up with demand. That month, Desert Bloom Designs generated over $3,000 in sales. After expenses, I was looking at nearly $2,000 profit, more than Kevin often brought home in a single month from the dealership. The irony wasn't lost on me. While Kevin criticized my computer time and dismissed my crafting as a waste of effort, my little hobby was becoming a legitimate income source. I was using marketing skills he'd forgotten I possessed, managing customer relationships with professionalism he claimed I'd lost, and building a brand that reflected creativity and business acumen I'd never stopped having. December brought holiday, orders that pushed my monthly sales over $5,000. I was working 12-hour days, managing inventory, fulfilling orders, and maintaining the 5-star customer service rating that kept my shop ranking high in Etsy searches. The spare bedroom had transformed into a proper studio with organized supplies, professional lighting, and efficient packaging stations. Kevin occasionally complained about my late nights and early mornings, suggesting I was spending too much time on my crafts. He'd remind me that the house needed attention, that dinner was sometimes late, that I seemed distracted during conversations. His solution was always the same. Maybe I should scale back the hobby and focus more on family responsibilities. What he didn't understand was that Desert Bloom Designs had become more than a hobby or even a business. It had become my redemption, proof that the woman he'd gradually diminished over 8 years still existed. Every customer review that praised my work, every repeat order, every month of growing sales, validated abilities and ambitions I'd thought were permanently buried under years of domestic routine. By January, I was generating consistent monthly sales between $6,000 and $8,000, with profit margins around 60%. I'd built a customer base of over 2,000 repeat buyers, developed relationships with wholesale suppliers, and created systems for inventory management that any business consultant would recognize as professional-grade operations. The financial security was transformative, but the psychological impact was even more significant. I was no longer financially dependent on Kevin's fluctuating sales commissions and arbitrary budgeting decisions. I had my own income, my own savings, my own financial identity separate from his control and opinions. For the first time in years, I felt like an equal partner in our marriage rather than a financial dependent. Kevin remained completely unaware of my success, seeing only the craft supplies and computer time, never the profit margins and business growth. His comments about my hobbies had become background noise, irrelevant to my actual reality. When he'd joke with friends about my little projects keeping me busy, I'd smile and nod, knowing that my little projects were out-earning his car sales on most months. The secret felt necessary rather than deceptive. Kevin had spent years establishing himself as the financial authority in our household, dismissing my input and minimizing my capabilities. Revealing my business success would require explaining why I'd hidden it, acknowledging the inequality in our relationship that we'd both become comfortable pretending didn't exist. So I continued building Desert Bloom designs in private, watching my business account grow while maintaining the appearance of a busy homemaker with an expensive crafting hobby. It was a strange double life, but one that felt increasingly natural, as my confidence returned and my financial independence solidified. Little did I know that Kevin's own financial secrets were about to collide with mine in ways that would expose everything. The first sign that something was seriously wrong came on a Tuesday morning in March, when Kevin's phone started ringing before 6 a.m. I was in the kitchen making coffee when I heard him answer with unusual sharpness in his voice. "Yeah, I know. What time it is? No, I can't talk right now." He hung up quickly and came into the kitchen looking pale and agitated. "Who calls that early?" I asked, pouring his coffee into the travel mug he took to the dealership every morning. Kevin took the mug without his usual thanks, his hands slightly trembling as he reached for it. "Wrong number," he said, but his eyes didn't meet mine. "Some telemarketer, probably." The phone rang again immediately, and this time Kevin rejected the call without even looking at the screen. Idiots don't know how to read time zones. Didn't push the issue, but something about his reaction felt off. In 14 years of marriage, I'd seen Kevin handle everything from difficult customers to family emergencies with his characteristic confidence. This nervous energy was completely unlike him. He left for work 20 minutes earlier than usual, kissing my cheek absently and muttering something about an early staff meeting. The rest of the week followed a similar pattern. Kevin's phone would ring at odd hours, and he'd either ignore the calls or step outside to answer them. His usual evening routine of watching television and complaining about work shifted to long periods on his laptop, typing emails with an intensity that seemed disproportionate to car sales correspondence. When I'd ask about his day, his responses became vague and dismissive in a way that felt different from his usual condescension about my understanding of business matters. "Just dealership stuff?" he'd say when I noticed him reviewing spreadsheets after dinner. "Numbers and inventory tracking. Nothing you'd find interesting." But his tone carried an edge of anxiety that contradicted his casual dismissal. Meanwhile, Desert Bloom Designs was experiencing its strongest quarter yet. Spring jewelry trends were driving sales of my lighter, more colorful pieces, and a feature in a popular lifestyle magazine had brought a surge of new customers. March sales had topped $9,000, and April was on track to exceed $12,000. My business account balance had grown to over $37,000, money I was carefully managing between reinvestment in inventory and building a genuine emergency fund. The irony of our situations wasn't lost on me. While Kevin grew, increasingly stressed about some mysterious work issue he wouldn't discuss. I was managing the most successful period in Desert Bloom's history. I was coordinating with 3 different suppliers, managing inventory across 4 product categories, and maintaining customer service standards that kept my reviews consistently above 4. 8 stars. Every aspect of running the business required skills Kevin insisted I'd lost during my years away from formal employment. My confidence was building in ways that extended beyond business success. When Emma's dance teacher mentioned needing help with costume organization for the spring recital, I volunteered immediately. When Jake's soccer coach asked for parent volunteers to manage tournament logistics, I stepped forward. These weren't tasks I'd avoided before, but my approach felt different now. I tackled organizational challenges with the same systematic thinking I used for inventory management, applied the same attention to detail I brought to customer service. Kevin noticed the change, though he couldn't identify its source. "You've been really busy lately," he observed one evening as I packed orders at the kitchen table. "All this craft stuff and school activities. Maybe you should slow down a bit. Don't want to burn yourself out over hobbies." His concern felt patronizing rather than caring. Another example of his assumption that my activities were inherently less important than his work. What he saw as craft stuff was actually a business generating more monthly income than his average sales commissions. What he characterized as burning out over hobbies was me successfully managing multiple revenue streams, customer relationships, and operational logistics. "I enjoy staying busy," I replied, sealing another package with my custom Desert Bloom stickers. "It gives me a sense of purpose." The response was honest, though Kevin couldn't possibly understand the depth of that purpose or the financial independence it was creating. The tension in our household escalated in early May when Kevin received a certified letter that required his signature. I watched him open it at the kitchen counter, his face losing color as he read the contents. The letter was brief, maybe 2 pages, but Kevin read it 3 times before folding it carefully and putting it in his pocket. "What was that about?" I asked, concerned by his obvious distress. Kevin had always shared details about work challenges, using me as a sounding board for customer complaints or dealership politics. This secretiveness was completely out of character. "Nothing important," he said, but his voice was tight. "Just some paperwork from the dealership's corporate office, routine stuff." The explanation felt rehearsed, as if he'd been preparing responses for questions he hoped I wouldn't ask. That weekend, Kevin spent hours on phone calls, pacing in our backyard and speaking in hushed tones. When Emma asked why Daddy was walking around outside talking to himself, I made excuses about important work calls. But Kevin's behavior was becoming impossible to ignore or explain away. Sunday evening brought the most telling incident yet. Kevin was at his laptop again, but this time I could see his screen from where I sat folding laundry on the couch. He was researching bankruptcy attorneys, scrolling through legal websites, and taking notes about debt consolidation options. When he noticed me watching, he quickly closed the browser and claimed he was helping a customer with financial planning. "Since when do car salesmen provide bankruptcy advice?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light despite growing concern. Kevin's face flushed, and he closed the laptop entirely. "It's complicated," he said. "Customer got in over his head with credit, asked for some guidance. I was just trying to be helpful." The explanation was weak, and we both knew it, but Kevin's defensive posture discouraged further questions. That night, after Kevin fell asleep, I lay awake thinking about the changes in his behavior, the mysterious phone calls, the legal research, and his growing anxiety about issues he wouldn't discuss. Whatever was happening with Kevin's work situation, it was serious enough to keep him awake at night and stressed enough to affect his appetite and mood. My own business continued thriving despite the growing tension at home. May sales exceeded $13,000, driven by Mother's Day promotions and the continuing success of my spring collection. I'd hired a virtual assistant to help with customer service and order processing. a decision that felt simultaneously thrilling and terrifying. Having employees, even part-time virtual ones, meant Desert Bloom Designs was becoming a real company, rather than just an elaborate hobby. The assistant, Maria Santos, worked from her home in Tucson and handled routine customer inquiries, order tracking, and basic social media management. Hiring her required explaining my business operations in detail, walking through systems and processes I developed intuitively over months of growth. The conversation made me realize how sophisticated Desert Bloom had become. How many business decisions I was making daily without conscious acknowledgement of their complexity. Maria's first comment after reviewing my operations was telling, "You've built something really impressive here. Most small businesses don't have systems this organized." Her professional validation felt especially meaningful, given Kevin's continuing dismissal of my work as simple crafting. The financial independence my business provided became even more precious as Kevin's mysterious stress continued building throughout May. Whatever was happening with his work, it was affecting his sales performance. His usually consistent commission checks became irregular, and I noticed him checking our bank balance more frequently. When I'd ask about lower than usual deposits, he'd blame slow sales months or delayed commission processing. "Car sales are cyclical," he'd explain when I expressed concern about our budget. "Some months are better than others. That's why we need to be careful with spending." His warnings about financial caution carried new weight given his obvious anxiety, but they also highlighted how little he knew about our actual financial situation. If Kevin had known about my business account, he'd have realized our household was more financially secure than it had been in years. Desert Bloom's success meant I could cover unexpected expenses, contribute to the kids' activities, and build genuine savings for our family's future. But Kevin's ignorance of my income meant he continued operating under the assumption that we were living paycheck to paycheck on his earnings alone. The contradiction became especially apparent when Emma's dance teacher announced an opportunity for advanced students to attend a summer intensive program in Los Angeles. The cost was $1,500, plus travel and accommodation expenses. Emma was desperate to participate, and her teacher strongly recommended her for the program. Kevin's response was predictably negative. "We can't afford that kind of expense right now," he told Emma, his voice carrying the stress that had become constant in recent weeks. "Maybe next year when things are more stable at work." Emma's disappointment was heartbreaking, especially since I knew we could easily afford the program with Desert Bloom's profits. That evening, after Emma had gone to bed disappointed and Kevin was outside on another mysterious phone call, I made a decision that felt both natural and revolutionary. I logged into my business account and transferred $2,000 to our joint checking account, enough to cover Emma's program plus the additional expenses. When Kevin found the deposit the next morning, his confusion was immediate. "There's been some kind of mistake," he said, showing me the bank statement on his phone. "Someone deposited money into our account by accident. I need to call the bank and report it." "It's not a mistake," I said calmly, sipping my coffee while Emma and Jake ate breakfast at the kitchen table. "I made the deposit. Emma can go to the dance intensive." Kevin stared at me as if I'd spoken in a foreign language. "You made a deposit? What deposit? Where did you get $2,000? His voice carried genuine bewilderment, as if the possibility of me having independent income was incomprehensible. "From my jewelry business," I explained, keeping my voice matter-of-fact despite the significance of this revelation. "Desert Bloom Designs has been quite successful. I thought it was time to contribute to family expenses." The silence that followed was profound. Emma looked up from her cereal, suddenly interested in a conversation she'd been ignoring. Jake continued eating, oblivious to the tension. Kevin's face cycled through confusion, disbelief, and something that might have been anger. "Your jewelry business?" he repeated slowly. "Your crafting hobby made $2,000? The way he said it suggested he was still processing the information. unable to reconcile his perception of my activities with the reality of the deposit. "More than that, actually," I replied. "This is just what I'm contributing to Emma's program. The business has been generating substantial income for over a year now." I was proud of how calm my voice sounded, how matter-of-fact I could be about success Kevin had consistently dismissed as impossible. Kevin set down his coffee mug with unusual force. "We'll discuss this later," he said, his tone suggesting displeasure rather than celebration of my success. "Emma, finish your breakfast. You don't want to be late for school." The conversation Kevin promised didn't happen that day or the next. He seemed to be avoiding the topic, perhaps hoping that ignoring my revelation would make it disappear. But Emma's excitement about the dance program made avoidance impossible. She thanked me repeatedly, telling friends about the opportunity, asking questions about travel arrangements that required immediate decisions. By the end of the week, Kevin's avoidance strategy collapsed. "We need to talk about this business of yours," he said Friday evening after the kids were in bed. His tone was serious, almost formal, as if he were addressing a problem employee rather than his wife. "What would you like to know?" I asked, genuinely curious about which aspects of Desert Bloom he wanted to understand. We were sitting in our living room, Kevin in his usual recliner, me on the couch with my laptop, responding to customer emails while we talked. "How long has this been going on?" he asked. "This jewelry selling thing. When did it start?" His questions felt like an interrogation rather than interest in my success. "About 18 months for serious sales," I explained. "I started the Etsy shop in August, but the real growth began around Christmas." I showed him my laptop screen, displaying the Desert Bloom design shop with its hundreds of products and thousands of reviews. Kevin examined the screen with the same expression he'd used to assess a suspicious car trade. "This is really yours? You made all this?" His tone suggested continuing disbelief rather than pride in my accomplishments. "Every piece," I confirmed. "Design, creation, photography, customer service, shipping. I manage all aspects of the business." I clicked through product pages, showing him the variety of items, the professional photos, the detailed descriptions that had taken hours to perfect. "And it makes money? Real money?" Kevin's focus on the financial aspect felt typical, though his skepticism was beginning to irritate me. After 18 months of consistent growth and success, his doubt seemed willfully ignorant. "Last month's sales were over $13,000, I said, watching his face for reaction. "Profit margins are typically around 60% after materials and fees." I pulled up my sales dashboard, showing him graphs and numbers that told the story of steady business growth. Kevin studied the screen in silence for several minutes, scrolling through data that clearly challenged his assumptions about my capabilities and activities. When he finally spoke, his words revealed the depth of his miscalculation. "$13,000? He repeated. "In 1 month? That's more than I make most months at the dealership." His voice carried a mix of surprise and something else, something that sounded almost like resentment. "It's been growing consistently," I explained. "Each month tends to be stronger than the last. I've built a customer base of repeat buyers, and word-of-mouth referrals keep bringing new people to the shop." I was proud of my success, but Kevin's reaction was making me defensive rather than celebratory. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, and this question carried hurt alongside confusion. "We're married. We're supposed to share things like this. Why keep it secret?" The question felt loaded with implications about trust and partnership that were complicated by our relationship's history. How could I explain that I'd kept the business secret because he'd consistently dismissed my capabilities? That his years of financial control and condescension had made me protective of my independence? "I wasn't sure it would continue being successful," I said carefully. "I wanted to prove it was sustainable before making it part of our family planning." The explanation was partially true, though it avoided the deeper issues that had motivated my secrecy. Kevin closed the laptop and leaned back in his chair, processing information that was clearly reshaping his understanding of our household dynamics. "So you've been making this kind of money for months, and you never mentioned it. You just let me worry about budgeting and bills while you had this income sitting somewhere?" His tone was shifting toward accusation, and I felt my own defensiveness rising. "The business account is separate," I explained. "I've been reinvesting most profits back into inventory and growth. This is the first time I've transferred money to our joint account." "Separate account?" Kevin's voice sharpened. "You opened a bank account without telling me? Used our address and information without discussing it?" His questions were making my financial independence sound deceptive rather than empowering. "I used my maiden name for the business," I said. "It's completely legitimate and legal. Many business owners maintain separate accounts for operational purposes." I was drawing on knowledge from my marketing background, but Kevin's expression suggested he viewed my explanations as excuses. The conversation continued for another hour, covering topics that revealed how differently we viewed my business success. Kevin seemed primarily concerned with the secrecy and control aspects, questioning why I hadn't consulted him about business decisions or included him in financial planning. I found myself defending choices that had felt natural and necessary, trying to explain motivations that were rooted in years of feeling financially powerless in our marriage. What neither of us addressed directly was the fundamental shift my business represented in our relationship dynamics. For 8 years, Kevin had been the sole income provider, the financial decision-maker, the one who understood money management while I handled domestic responsibilities. Desert Bloom's success meant I was no longer financially dependent on his approval or support, a change that affected every aspect of our partnership. The following Monday brought a development that would make our previous concerns seem trivial, by comparison. Kevin left for work as usual, but returned home just after lunch with an expression I'd never seen before. Not anger or confusion, but something closer to panic. "We need to talk," he said, sitting heavily at the kitchen table where I was packaging orders for afternoon pickup. "Something's happened at work, something serious." His hands were shaking slightly as he spoke, and his usual color had drained from his face. "What kind of something?" I asked, setting aside my packaging materials to give him full attention. Kevin's distress was so obvious that my own anxiety began rising in response. "The IRS came to the dealership this morning," he said quietly. "They're auditing my sales records, looking into discrepancies between reported income and actual commissions." He paused, running his hands through his hair. "They've frozen our bank accounts pending investigation." The words took a moment to register fully. Frozen bank accounts meant no access to our checking or savings, no way to pay bills or buy groceries, no financial resources except what we had in cash on hand. I thought immediately of the mortgage payment due next week, the utility bills, the kids' expenses. "What kind of discrepancies?" I asked, though Kevin's behavior over the past months was beginning to make sense. The mysterious phone calls, the legal research, the stress and secrecy all pointed to problems he'd been trying to handle alone. Kevin's explanation came in halting sentences, interrupted by pauses as he struggled with admissions that clearly embarrassed him. For the past 2 years, he'd been participating in a side business selling cars privately, using the dealership's resources and customer base to broker deals that weren't reported through official channels. The additional income had been substantial, sometimes adding $3,000 or $4,000 monthly to his earnings. "I thought it was harmless," he said. "Just using my expertise to help people find cars, making connections between buyers and sellers. I didn't think about tax implications or reporting requirements." His voice carried the weight of someone realizing the magnitude of their mistake. The private sales had generated over $60,000 in unreported income over 2 years. The IRS investigation had been triggered by inconsistencies between Kevin's reported earnings and lifestyle expenses, discrepancies that suggested additional income sources. Now they were freezing assets while they determined the full scope of unreported earnings and calculated penalties and back taxes. "How long will the accounts be frozen?" I asked, trying to process the immediate practical implications. We had maybe $300 in cash, enough for groceries for a week, but nowhere near sufficient for mortgage payments or other major expenses. "They wouldn't say," Kevin replied. "Could be weeks, could be months. Depends on how long the investigation takes and whether they find other issues." His voice was barely above a whisper, as if speaking quietly might minimize the severity of our situation. I thought about Desert Bloom's business account, the $37,000 that Kevin knew nothing about until a week ago. Money he'd dismissed as craft hobby profits was about to become our family's lifeline, the only financial resource standing between us and complete ruin. "What about your job?" I asked. "Does the dealership know about the private sales?" Kevin's employment situation would determine whether we had any ongoing income while the IRS investigation continued. "They suspended me pending internal review," he said. "No pay, no commission, no access to dealership resources. They have to protect themselves while the investigation is ongoing." Kevin's career, his identity as a successful salesman, his financial contribution to our family had all been suspended indefinitely. The irony was overwhelming. For months, Kevin had stressed about mysterious financial problems while dismissing my business as inconsequential hobby work. Now his unreported income had destroyed our family's financial stability, while my carefully managed legitimate business represented our only path to survival. That evening, after we'd explained to Emma and Jake that money would be tight for a while without revealing the full severity of our situation, I made another transfer from Desert Bloom's account to cover our immediate needs. $5,000 for the mortgage payment, utilities, and groceries until we could determine the timeline for resolving Kevin's tax problems. Kevin watched me complete the online transfer with an expression that mixed gratitude with something that might have been shame. The woman he'd characterized as financially naive was now managing our family's crisis with resources he'd never known existed. "I'm sorry," he said quietly as I closed my laptop. "For all of this. For not telling you about the problems. For dismissing your business. For putting our family in this position." His apology felt genuine, but it also carried the weight of someone whose fundamental assumptions about our relationship had been shattered. "We'll figure it out," I replied, though I wasn't sure exactly how. Kevin's tax problems could take months to resolve, and his employment situation was uncertain at best. My business income would need to support our entire family while we navigated legal and financial complications I'd never imagined facing. The secret business I'd built while Kevin dismissed my capabilities had become our family's salvation. The financial independence I'd developed in response to his condescension was now protecting the very lifestyle he'd worked to provide. Desert Bloom Designs, the hobby he'd barely acknowledged, was about to become the foundation of our survival. That first night after Kevin's revelation about the frozen accounts and IRS investigation, I lay awake staring at the ceiling while he tossed restlessly beside me. The weight of our new reality pressed down like a physical force. My husband, the man who had spent years explaining to me how money worked and why I couldn't possibly understand financial complexity, had made decisions that could destroy everything we'd built together. Meanwhile, the business he'd dismissed as meaningless craft work was now the only thing preventing our family from losing our home. The transformation happening inside me wasn't anger exactly, though anger was certainly part of it. It was something deeper and more fundamental, a recognition that everything I'd accepted about our relationship had been built on assumptions that were proving false. Kevin wasn't the financial expert he'd presented himself as. I wasn't the economically naive housewife he'd convinced both of us I had become. The power dynamic that had defined our marriage for nearly a decade was crumbling, and something entirely new was emerging in its place. I got up quietly around 3 in the morning and went to my workspace in the spare bedroom. Surrounded by inventory, packaging materials, and the systematic organization I'd developed for Desert Bloom Designs, I felt a clarity that had been missing from our marriage for years. This space represented my competence, my growth, my ability to build something meaningful from nothing but determination and skill. Kevin had never really seen this room as anything more than a cluttered craft corner, but it was actually the headquarters of a business that was about to save our family. The next morning brought a series of conversations that would reshape everything. First, I called my virtual assistant Maria to explain our family situation and discuss expanding her role. With Kevin unemployed and our household income dependent entirely on Desert Bloom, I needed to maximize the business's potential immediately. "I was wondering when you'd be ready to scale up," Maria said when I outlined my thoughts about increasing inventory, expanding product lines, and potentially hiring additional help. "Your growth patterns have been pointing toward this for months. Most businesses your size have multiple team members by now." Her matter-of-fact assessment of Desert Bloom as a legitimate business requiring professional expansion felt surreal. Against the backdrop of Kevin's continued dismissal of my work, Maria saw systems, growth potential, and scalability where my husband saw hobby crafts. Her perspective validated feelings I'd been having, but hadn't fully acknowledged about the scope of what I'd created. "I'm ready to invest in growth," I told her, a statement that felt both natural and revolutionary. For the first time, I was making significant business decisions without considering Kevin's opinions or approval. Our financial crisis had forced me to claim full ownership of choices I'd been making tentatively for months. We discussed expanding from my current 20-hour work weeks to full-time operations, hiring a second virtual assistant to handle social media marketing, and potentially bringing on a part-time local helper for packaging and shipping. These weren't desperate measures to generate quick cash, but strategic decisions to build Desert Bloom into a company that could sustainably support our family's needs. The second crucial conversation was with Rachel Chen, my former college roommate, who had become a successful e-commerce entrepreneur. Rachel and I had reconnected through social media about 6 months earlier, and she'd been following Desert Bloom's progress with the encouraging interest of someone who understood the challenges of building an online business. "Lisa, I've been waiting for you to call," Rachel said when I reached her Tuesday morning. "I saw your shop's growth metrics through some industry tools I use, and I've been hoping you'd be ready to discuss taking things to the next level." Her voice carried the confidence of someone who had navigated similar transitions successfully. Rachel's business, Zen Garden Home, had started similarly to Desert Bloom, but had grown into a 7-figure operation specializing in home decor and wellness products. She understood both the opportunities and pitfalls of rapid expansion, and her experience could help me avoid mistakes that might derail Desert Bloom's growth. "What kind of next level are we talking about?" I asked, though part of me already knew the answer. Desert Bloom had reached the point where it could either remain a successful side business or evolve into something much more significant. "You're sitting on a gold mine," Rachel explained. "Your customer loyalty rates are exceptional, your product quality is consistent, and your brand positioning is perfect for expansion into wholesale accounts and corporate partnerships. But you need infrastructure and strategy to scale without losing what makes your business special." We talked for over an hour about wholesale opportunities, corporate gift programs, seasonal product lines, and the operational changes required to handle larger order volumes. Rachel offered to connect me with her suppliers, introduce me to wholesale buyers, and share resources for business development that had taken her years to discover through trial and error. The most significant insight from our conversation was Rachel's assessment of Desert Bloom's current value and potential. "Based on your sales history and growth trajectory, you're looking at a business that could generate $200,000 to $300,000 annually within 18 months with proper scaling," she said. "That's not craft hobby money, Lisa. That's supporting a family money." Her words hit me with unexpected force. I'd been thinking of Desert Bloom as successful supplemental income, but Rachel was describing a business that could replace Kevin's dealership salary entirely. The possibility of true financial independence, not just as backup support but as primary household income, was both thrilling and terrifying. After ending the call with Rachel, I spent the afternoon updating financial projections and business plans with a seriousness I'd never applied to Desert Bloom before. What had started as proof that I still had marketable skills was evolving into a comprehensive business strategy that could reshape our family's entire financial future. Kevin found me at the kitchen table that evening, surrounded by spreadsheets, supplier catalogs, and legal pads covered with expansion plans. His expression mixed curiosity with something that might have been concern as he examined my work. "What's all this?" he asked, sitting across from me and picking up one of the product catalogs I'd been reviewing. "More jewelry stuff?" His tone carried the dismissive edge I'd grown accustomed to, but it felt increasingly disconnected from the reality of what I was actually doing. "Business planning," I replied simply. "Desert Bloom is at a growth inflection point. I'm exploring expansion opportunities that could significantly increase our revenue." I used the language Rachel had taught me, professional terminology that reflected the seriousness of my planning. Kevin flipped through the catalog, examining wholesale jewelry findings and packaging supplies with the same skeptical expression he'd worn when discovering my business success. "Expansion? How much expansion are we talking about here?" I pulled out the financial projections I'd spent hours perfecting. "Conservative estimates suggest we could triple current revenue within 12 months with proper investment in inventory and marketing. Optimistic projections show potential for 5 times current sales if we pursue wholesale accounts and corporate partnerships." The numbers on my spreadsheet told a story Kevin wasn't prepared to hear. Current monthly sales averaging $10,000, projected to reach $25,000 to $30,000 within a year. Annual revenue potential of $300,000 or more, compared to Kevin's dealership salary of $65,000 before his suspension. "These numbers seem unrealistic," Kevin said after studying my projections. "Online businesses don't just grow like this. There has to be more competition, market saturation, something that limits growth." His skepticism felt automatic rather than analytical, as if he needed my success to remain small enough to fit his understanding of my capabilities. "Rachel Chen's business grew from similar starting points to 7 figures annually," I explained. "She's offered to mentor me through the scaling process and connect me with her supplier network and wholesale contacts." Mentioning Rachel's success gave my projections external validation that Kevin couldn't dismiss as easily as my own optimism. Kevin's reaction to Rachel's involvement was revealing. "You're talking to people about our financial situation? Our family business isn't something to discuss with outsiders." His concern about privacy seemed inconsistent with his own networking and business relationships, suggesting discomfort with my developing professional connections. "Rachel is a successful business owner offering professional guidance," I replied. "Consulting with experienced entrepreneurs is standard practice for business growth. It's not gossip, Kevin. It's strategic planning." My response carried confidence that surprised both of us, a professional authority I'd never claimed in our marriage before. The conversation that followed revealed the depth of our disconnect about my business and its implications for our relationship. Kevin continued viewing Desert Bloom as an elaborate hobby that had gotten temporarily profitable, while I was recognizing it as a legitimate enterprise with potential to transform our family's economic situation entirely. "I don't understand why you need to make this so complicated," Kevin said, his frustration evident. "You have a nice little business that makes some extra money. Why not just keep it simple instead of turning it into some major production?" His characterization of Desert Bloom as a nice little business felt patronizing and dismissive of the sophisticated systems I'd developed, the professional relationships I was building, and the growth potential Rachel had identified. More importantly, it revealed Kevin's inability to imagine me as anything more than a supplemental contributor to our household finances. Because simple isn't going to support our family while you're suspended from work, I said, my voice sharper than intended. Because the IRS investigation could take months to resolve, and we need sustainable income to pay our mortgage and feed our children. Because this isn't a hobby anymore, Kevin. It's our financial lifeline. The silence that followed my response carried weight neither of us was fully prepared to acknowledge. I had claimed responsibility for our family's financial stability, essentially reversing the roles that had defined our marriage for 8 years. Kevin was no longer the provider while I managed domestic responsibilities. I was the income generator while he dealt with legal and professional consequences of his poor decisions. Over the following days, I threw myself into implementing the expansion plans Rachel and I had discussed. I contacted suppliers about bulk purchasing agreements, researched wholesale marketplace platforms, and began developing product lines specifically designed for corporate and bulk sales. The work required 12 to 14-hour days, but it felt energizing rather than exhausting. Emma and Jake noticed the change in our household dynamics immediately. "Why is Mom always working now?" Jake asked Kevin one afternoon when I was on a business call with a potential wholesale buyer. "She's always on the computer or making jewelry or talking to people about business stuff." Kevin's response was telling. "Mom's business has gotten busier since Dad's work situation changed. She's helping make sure we can pay our bills." His explanation was accurate, but revealed his continuing discomfort with my role as primary income provider. He couldn't bring himself to say that my business was supporting our family, or that his mistakes had made my success essential. The transformation happening in our relationship became more apparent as days passed. Kevin, accustomed to making financial decisions and explaining economic realities to me, found himself asking questions about business operations he didn't understand. When I mentioned trademark applications and business insurance policies, his confusion was obvious. "Do you really need all this legal stuff?" he asked when I explained the intellectual property protections Rachel had recommended. "It seems like a lot of expense and complication for selling jewelry online." His question revealed the gap between his perception of Desert Bloom and its actual sophistication. What he saw as unnecessary complication was actually standard business practice for companies generating six-figure annual revenues. His inability to recognize the legitimacy of my operations made productive collaboration increasingly difficult. The most significant shift came when I realized I no longer sought Kevin's approval or input for business decisions. For months, I'd been making choices about inventory, pricing, and marketing while carefully avoiding conflicts with his opinions about my work. Now, with our family's survival dependent on Desert Bloom's success, I was operating with complete autonomy. When a wholesale buyer in California wanted to place a $15,000 initial order, I accepted immediately without consulting Kevin. When Rachel suggested investing $8,000 in new inventory to meet increasing demand, I approved the expenditure based entirely on my own analysis of cash flow and growth projections. "You spent $8,000 without discussing it with me?" Kevin asked when he saw the supplier charges on my business credit card statement. His tone carried hurt alongside anger, as if my independent decision-making represented a betrayal of our partnership. "I used business funds for business investments," I replied calmly. "Desert Bloom's cash flow easily supports this inventory purchase, and the projected return is over 300% within 60 days. I was speaking to Kevin the way I might address a concerned but uninformed stakeholder, rather than seeking permission from a financial authority. Kevin's struggle to adapt to our new dynamic was understandable, but also frustrating. He'd spent years positioning himself as the family's financial expert while characterizing me as economically naive. Now I was making complex business decisions, managing multiple revenue streams, and supporting our household while he dealt with the consequences of his hidden financial mistakes. The success of Desert Bloom's expansion exceeded even Rachel's optimistic projections. Within 3 weeks of implementing our growth strategy, monthly sales jumped to over $18,000. The wholesale accounts generated large orders, with higher profit margins, while retail sales continued growing through improved social media marketing and customer referral programs. More importantly, I was developing confidence and professional identity that extended beyond business success. When suppliers or wholesale buyers called to discuss orders, they spoke to me with the respect accorded to serious business owners. When Maria suggested strategic partnerships with complementary brands, she consulted me as the decision-making authority. When Rachel introduced me to other entrepreneurs in her network, they welcomed me as a peer rather than someone's wife dabbling in crafts. The contrast with Kevin's treatment of my work became increasingly stark. While professional contacts recognized Desert Bloom as a legitimate business generating substantial revenue, Kevin continued referring to it as my jewelry hobby that had gotten temporarily profitable. His inability to acknowledge the scope of my success was becoming a barrier to honest communication about our financial situation and future plans. The culmination of this tension came during a family dinner when Emma asked about our summer vacation plans. Previous years had involved camping trips or visits to Kevin's parents, modest vacations that fit our budget constraints. This year, with Kevin unemployed and our traditional income sources eliminated, vacation planning required different considerations. "We'll need to keep things simple this summer," Kevin told Emma. "Dad's work situation means we can't spend money on big trips." His explanation positioned our financial limitations as temporary inconveniences caused by his employment problems rather than acknowledging Desert Bloom's success as a potential solution. "Actually," I interjected, "Desert Bloom's revenues could support a nice family vacation if we plan appropriately. Business has been strong enough to cover both our regular expenses and some discretionary spending." My comment was factually accurate but represented a direct challenge to Kevin's narrative about our financial constraints. Emma's excitement was immediate. "Really? Can we go somewhere special? Maybe the beach or Disneyland?" Her enthusiasm was infectious, and even Jake perked up at the possibility of a real vacation rather than another camping trip. Kevin's discomfort was obvious. "We shouldn't make plans based on temporary business success," he said carefully. "It's better to be conservative until we know what my work situation will be long-term." His caution was reasonable, but it also revealed his assumption that my business success was unsustainable, while his employment problems were temporary setbacks. "The business isn't temporary," I replied, my voice carrying certainty that surprised even me. Desert Bloom is generating consistent revenue with strong growth trends. It's not a lucky streak or temporary windfall. It's a legitimate business that can support our family's needs and goals. The declaration felt monumental, a public claiming of my business success and its implications for our family's future. Emma and Jake might not have understood the full significance of my words, but Kevin certainly did. I was announcing that Desert Bloom wasn't supplemental income, but primary financial support, that my success wasn't dependent on his approval or understanding. That evening, after the children were in bed, Kevin attempted to address the shift happening in our relationship. "I feel like I don't know what's happening anymore," he said quietly. 6 months ago, you were making jewelry as a hobby. Now you're talking about supporting the family and making all these business decisions without me. I don't know where I fit in any of this." His vulnerability was genuine, and I felt sympathy for his confusion even as I recognized the impossibility of returning to our previous dynamic. "You fit in as my partner and the father of our children," I said. "But the financial roles have changed because circumstances forced them to change. Your tax problems eliminated your income while my business grew to the point where it can support us." Kevin was quiet for several minutes, processing information that challenged fundamental assumptions about our relationship and his identity within our family. When he finally spoke, his words revealed the depth of his struggle with our new reality. "I've always been the one who provided for this family," he said. "That's who I am, what I do. I don't know how to be the husband whose wife supports everyone while he figures out his legal problems." His admission carried pain that went beyond financial concerns to questions of masculine identity and marital roles. "You don't have to. Figure it all out immediately," I replied. "We're both adjusting to changes neither of us expected. But Kevin, you need to recognize that what I've built is real and valuable. Desert Bloom isn't going away when your employment situation resolves. It's become part of who I am and what our family's future looks like." The conversation marked a turning point in our relationship, an acknowledgement that the changes triggered by Kevin's crisis were permanent rather than temporary adjustments. I was no longer the financially dependent housewife he'd grown comfortable with, and he was no longer the unquestioned financial authority in our marriage. Whatever came next would require negotiating entirely new terms for how we related to each other as partners. Desert Bloom Designs had saved our family from financial ruin, but it had also fundamentally altered the foundation of our marriage. The woman Kevin had dismissed as economically naive was now managing complex business operations and supporting our household while he dealt with the consequences of his hidden financial mistakes. Success had given me independence, confidence, and professional identity that would outlast our current crisis and reshape everything about our future together. The breakthrough moment came on a Thursday morning in late June when Rachel called with news that would change everything. "Lisa, I just got off the phone with Marcus Rivera at Southwest Home Collections," she said, her voice barely containing excitement. "They want to feature Desert Bloom as their exclusive jewelry line for the fall catalog. We're talking about a 6-figure contract." I was in my workspace, packaging orders for the morning UPS pickup, when her call came through. The significance of what she was saying took a moment to register fully. Southwest Home Collections was a major regional retailer with over 200 stores across Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, and California. Their fall catalog reached nearly 1 million households, and being featured as an exclusive partner represented the kind of opportunity that could transform Desert Bloom from a successful online business into a major brand. "What exactly does exclusive partnership mean?" I asked, setting down the necklace I'd been wrapping and giving Rachel my complete attention. The conversation that followed would prove to be the most important business discussion of my life. Marcus Rivera had been tracking Desert Bloom's growth through industry analytics and was impressed by our customer retention rates, product quality, and brand consistency. Southwest Home Collections was looking to partner with authentic regional artisans whose work reflected Southwestern style and values, and Desert Bloom fit their criteria perfectly. The partnership would involve creating custom product lines specifically for Southwest's customers, featuring pieces that maintained Desert Bloom's aesthetic while meeting their volume and pricing requirements. The initial contract would guarantee minimum orders totaling $120,000 over 6 months, with potential for renewal and expansion based on sales performance. "They want to meet with you next week," Rachel continued. "Marcus will be in Phoenix Wednesday for a site visit and product review. This is exactly the kind of opportunity I've been hoping would come along for you." Her excitement was infectious, but it was also overwhelming. 6 months ago, I'd been celebrating my first $1,000 sales month. Now I was being offered contracts that would establish Desert Bloom as a significant regional brand. After ending the call with Rachel, I sat in my workspace trying to process the implications of Southwest's interest. The partnership would require scaling operations beyond anything I'd previously imagined, potentially hiring local employees, renting dedicated workspace, and managing inventory levels that dwarfed my current operations. More significantly, the Southwest contract would generate revenue that exceeded Kevin's previous dealership income by a substantial margin. What had started as proof that I retained professional capabilities would officially become our family's primary economic foundation, a transformation that carried implications for every aspect of our relationship. Kevin found me an hour later, still sitting among half-packed orders and staring at notes I'd scribbled during Rachel's call. His approach to my workspace had become cautious in recent weeks, as if he wasn't sure whether he was welcome in the room that had become the center of our family's financial operations. "Everything okay?" he asked, noticing my stunned expression and the scattered notes. "You look like you've seen a ghost." His concern felt genuine, though it carried the awkward quality of someone trying to navigate a relationship that had changed beyond recognition. "Southwest Home Collections wants to partner with Desert Bloom," I said slowly, the words feeling surreal even as I spoke them. "They're offering a 6-figure exclusive contract for their fall catalog." I watched Kevin's face as he processed information that would have seemed impossible when he'd first discovered my business success. Kevin's reaction cycled through the familiar pattern of disbelief, confusion, and reluctant acceptance that had characterized his responses to Desert Bloom's growth. "6 figures?" he repeated. "As in over $100,000? For jewelry?" His tone carried the skepticism that had become his default response to my business achievements. "120,000 guaranteed for the initial 6-month contract," I confirmed, showing him the notes I'd taken during Rachel's call, "with potential for renewal and expansion if sales meet their projections. It's a legitimate partnership with a major regional retailer." Kevin studied my notes with the same expression he'd worn when first learning about Desert Bloom's success, as if he was examining evidence of something that shouldn't be possible. "This is really happening?" he asked finally. "Companies that size really want to work with your business?" His question revealed the continuing gap between his perception of my work and its actual scope and sophistication. After months of consistent growth, professional recognition, and substantial revenue generation, Kevin still seemed surprised that Desert Bloom was being taken seriously by major business partners. "Marcus Rivera will be here Wednesday to review our operations and discuss contract terms," I explained. "He wants to see our workspace, examine product samples, and understand our capacity for scaling production to meet their volume requirements." The meeting would be Desert Bloom's most important business presentation, and its outcome would determine our family's financial trajectory for years to come. Kevin's response to the upcoming meeting was revealing in its focus. "Our workspace? He's coming here? To the house?" His primary concern seemed to be about appearances rather than the business opportunity itself, as if he was worried about what Southwest's representative might think of our home-based operations. "Professional businesses operate from home offices all the time," I replied, feeling defensive about arrangements that had proven perfectly adequate for generating 6-figure annual revenue. Desert Bloom's operational efficiency and product quality speak for themselves, regardless of whether we're based in a house or a commercial building. The conversation highlighted Kevin's continuing inability to fully accept the legitimacy and sophistication of what I'd built. His concerns about appearances suggested he still viewed Desert Bloom through the lens of hobby crafting rather than recognizing it as the professional operation it had become. Over the weekend, I prepared for Wednesday's meeting with an intensity that surprised even me. I organized product samples, prepared financial reports and growth projections, and arranged my workspace to showcase Desert Bloom's operational efficiency and professional systems. Rachel provided guidance on presentation strategies and contract negotiation, helping me prepare for discussions that would determine the future scope of my business. The most significant preparation, however, was psychological. I was about to present myself as the CEO and creative director of a business capable of fulfilling major wholesale contracts, roles that required confidence and authority I'd been developing gradually over months of success. The meeting with Marcus Rivera would test whether I could claim those roles convincingly when stakes were highest. Kevin observed my preparations with a mixture of curiosity and anxiety that reflected his own uncertain position in our evolving family dynamic. "You seem really confident about all this," he said Tuesday evening as I reviewed presentation materials for the third time. "More confident than I've seen you about anything in years." His observation was accurate and telling. The confidence he noticed wasn't just about business success, but about reclaiming parts of my identity that had been dormant during my years as a financially dependent housewife. Desert Bloom had given me more than income. It had returned my sense of professional competence and personal agency. "I know what I've built," I replied simply. "I understand Desert Bloom's strengths, growth potential, and market position. That knowledge gives me confidence in discussing partnership opportunities with serious buyers." My response carried certainty that would have been impossible 6 months earlier, before Kevin's crisis forced me to fully claim ownership of my business success. Wednesday morning brought Phoenix's typical June heat, with temperatures climbing toward 110 degrees by mid-morning. Marcus Rivera arrived precisely at 10, driving a white SUV with Southwest Home Collections, logos, and carrying a professional portfolio that suggested serious business intentions. My first impression of Marcus was positive. He was probably 45, casually dressed but professional, with the easy confidence of someone comfortable making significant business deals. His initial questions focused on Desert Bloom's operational capacity and quality control systems, indicating genuine interest in our ability to fulfill large orders consistently. "Rachel Chen speaks very highly of your work," Marcus said as I led him through my workspace, showing him inventory organization, packaging systems, and product development areas. "She mentioned your growth trajectory and customer satisfaction rates, both of which align perfectly with what Southwest looks for in partnership candidates." The tour went better than I'd hoped. Marcus examined product samples with obvious appreciation for their quality and craftsmanship, asked intelligent questions about our manufacturing processes and supply chain management, and seemed impressed by the systematic approach I'd developed for managing all aspects of the business. "This is exactly the kind of authentic artisan operation our customers value," he said after reviewing my full product line. "Quality craftsmanship, consistent branding, and clear attention to customer experience. Southwest's partnership would help you scale these strengths to reach much larger markets." Kevin had remained in the background during most of Marcus's visit, observing quietly while I presented Desert Bloom's capabilities and discussed expansion possibilities. His role felt similar to a spouse attending a meeting that primarily concerned my professional responsibilities, a reversal of dynamics that had characterized our marriage for years. The contract discussion exceeded my most optimistic expectations. Southwest's initial partnership would feature Desert Bloom products in their fall catalog, with guaranteed minimum orders of $20,000 monthly for 6 months. Success in the initial period would lead to expanded partnerships, potentially including exclusive product lines and featured placements in their spring catalog. "We're prepared to offer a signing bonus of $15,000 to help with the operational expansion required to meet our volume needs," Marcus explained as we reviewed contract terms. "We understand that scaling production requires upfront investment in inventory, equipment, and potentially additional staff." The signing bonus alone represented nearly 3 months of Kevin's previous monthly salary, money that would be paid simply for agreeing to the partnership. Combined with guaranteed monthly orders, the Southwest contract would generate more annual income than Kevin had ever earned at the dealership, establishing Desert Bloom as unquestionably our family's primary financial resource. After Marcus left, I sat in my workspace reviewing the contract documents he'd provided, trying to absorb the magnitude of what had just occurred. In 18 months, Desert Bloom had evolved from a creative outlet that generated modest supplemental income to a business being courted by major retailers offering 6-figure partnerships. Kevin found me there an hour later, still surrounded by contract papers and projections for the operational changes Southwest's partnership would require. His expression carried a complexity I'd rarely seen, mixing pride, confusion, and something that might have been loss. "That was impressive," he said quietly, settling into the chair I'd arranged for Marcus's visit. "The way you presented everything, answered his questions, negotiated contract terms. You sounded like a real business executive." His words carried validation, but they also revealed his surprise at my professional competence. "I am a real business executive," I replied, the statement feeling both natural and revolutionary. Desert Bloom isn't a hobby that accidentally became profitable. It's a legitimate business that I've built systematically using skills and knowledge. That never disappeared just because I stayed home with the kids. Kevin nodded slowly, acknowledging a truth that seemed to be sinking in fully for the first time. I haven't given you enough credit, he said finally, for any of this. I kept thinking of your business as temporary or lucky, but what I saw today was professional and sophisticated. You've built something real. His admission felt significant, an acknowledgement that carried potential for rebuilding respect and partnership between us. But it also highlighted the years of dismissal and condescension that had preceded this recognition. Damage that couldn't be undone simply by acknowledging my current success. The Southwest partnership changes everything, I continued, outlining the operational expansion that would be required to fulfill their orders. I'll need to hire local employees, possibly rent dedicated workspace, and invest significantly in equipment and inventory. This isn't supplemental income anymore, Kevin. It's our family's primary business. The implications of my words settled between us like a challenge to everything our marriage had been based on. I was claiming authority not just over my business decisions, but over our family's economic future, a role Kevin had filled exclusively for our entire relationship. What does that mean for us? Kevin asked, the question carrying weight beyond immediate logistics. For our marriage, our family, our future plans, I don't know how to be married to someone who doesn't need me financially. His honesty was painful, but necessary. Our relationship had been built on assumptions about financial dependence and professional competence that no longer applied. I was no longer the economically naive housewife who needed his financial expertise, and he was no longer the sole provider whose career determined our family's security. It means we figure out how to be partners in different ways, I said carefully. Your worth isn't defined by being our only income source, Kevin. You're still Emma and Jake's father, still my husband if that's what we both want. But yes, the financial dynamic has changed permanently. Over the following days, I threw myself into preparing for the operational expansion Southwest's partnership would require. I researched commercial workspace options, interviewed candidates for production assistant positions, and worked with Rachel to develop systems that could handle much larger order volumes without compromising the quality and attention to detail that had built Desert Bloom's reputation. The transformation was exhilarating and overwhelming. Within weeks, I would be managing employees, negotiating with multiple suppliers, and overseeing production schedules that generated revenue exceeding anything Kevin had achieved in his career. The responsibility felt both natural and surreal. A return to professional leadership I'd thought was permanently behind me. Kevin's adjustment to our new reality proved more difficult than I'd anticipated. His tax situation remained unresolved. His employment prospects were limited by the ongoing IRS investigation, and his traditional role as family provider had been eliminated by circumstances largely of his own making. Watching me negotiate major business deals while he dealt with legal consequences of his financial mistakes created a role reversal that challenged his fundamental sense of identity. The lowest point came during a family dinner when Jake innocently asked why Mom was always working while Dad stayed home. Mom has the important job now, Emma explained to her younger brother. Dad's job got him in trouble, so Mom's business has to take care of our family. Emma's matter-of-fact assessment of our situation was accurate, but devastating for Kevin. His face went pale as his daughter explained to her brother that Daddy's work problems had made Mommy's success essential for their survival. The children's casual acceptance of our reversed roles highlighted how completely our family dynamics had shifted. That evening, Kevin and I had the most honest conversation of our marriage. I don't know who I am if I'm not providing for this family, he admitted, his voice carrying vulnerability I'd rarely heard. That's been my identity for 15 years. The man who worked hard so his wife could stay home with the kids. Now you're supporting all of us while I figure out legal problems I created through my own stupidity." His pain was genuine, and I felt sympathy for the loss of identity he was experiencing, even as I recognized the necessity of our changed circumstances. "You're still the father of our children and my partner," I said. "Those roles don't disappear because the financial situation changed. But Kevin, you need to understand that I can't go back to being financially dependent and professionally invisible. What I've built isn't temporary, and I won't give it up to preserve your comfort with traditional roles." The conversation marked a turning point in our relationship, an acknowledgement that whatever came next would require negotiating entirely new terms for how we related to each other. Kevin's tax problems would eventually be resolved, but Desert Bloom's success was permanent. I was no longer willing to diminish my achievements or downplay my capabilities to maintain his sense of masculine authority. The Southwest Partnership officially launched in August with a signing ceremony at their Phoenix headquarters. Kevin attended as my guest, watching as I signed contracts that would generate more income in 6 months than he'd earned in his best year at the dealership. The symbolism wasn't lost on either of us. I was being celebrated as a successful entrepreneur, while he remained suspended from his career due to legal problems. Desert Bloom's featured placement in Southwest's fall catalog exceeded all sales projections. The combination of professional photography, strategic product placement, and Southwest's extensive customer base generated orders that required hiring 3 part-time employees and renting a small warehouse space for inventory management. By October, Desert Bloom Designs was generating over $30,000 monthly in revenue, with profit margins that supported not only our family's expenses, but significant reinvestment in business growth. The success felt surreal against the backdrop of where we'd been just months earlier, when Kevin's dismissive comments about my computer time had reflected his complete misunderstanding of what I was building. The grocery store incident that had started our story felt like a lifetime ago. The woman who'd stood embarrassed at the checkout counter, unable to pay for basic groceries while her husband's accounts were frozen, had been replaced by someone managing complex business operations and supporting her family through her own professional success. Kevin's legal situation finally resolved in November with a settlement that required paying back taxes and penalties, but avoided criminal charges. His suspension from the dealership was lifted, and he was offered the opportunity to return to his previous position. The offer forced a decision about our family's future that neither of us had been prepared to make. "I could go back to selling cars," Kevin said as we discussed his employment options. "Try to rebuild what I had before, or I could figure out how to contribute to what you've built instead of competing with it." His words carried recognition that our relationship's foundation had shifted permanently. The choice Kevin faced reflected broader questions about how couples navigate fundamental changes in power dynamics and professional identity. Could he find fulfillment supporting my business success rather than pursuing independent career advancement? Could I trust him as a partner after years of dismissal and condescension? Could we build something new from the broken pieces of what we'd been? "I want you to be happy and fulfilled," I told him honestly. "But I won't compromise Desert Bloom's success or my professional independence to make room for your ego. If you come back to selling cars, that's fine. If you want to work with me, that's fine too. But either way, you need to accept that I'm no longer the financially dependent housewife you married." Kevin's decision to join Desert Bloom as operations manager surprised both of us. His organizational skills and customer service experience proved valuable for managing the logistics of our expanded operations, while his humility about his new role demonstrated genuine growth in his understanding of our partnership. Working together required establishing clear boundaries and mutual respect that had been missing from our marriage for years. Kevin's expertise in scheduling, inventory management, and customer relations complemented my creative and strategic leadership, creating a professional partnership that gradually rebuilt personal trust. The transformation wasn't immediate or simple. Months of counseling helped us navigate the psychological adjustments required by our reversed roles and changed power dynamics. Kevin had to learn to value contributions beyond financial provision, while I had to forgive years of dismissal and condescension that had nearly destroyed my confidence in my own capabilities. By the following spring, Desert Bloom Designs had evolved into a six-figure business with 8 employees, partnerships with 3 major retailers, and expansion plans that included launching our own e-commerce platform and opening a flagship retail location in Scottsdale. What had started as proof that I retained professional capabilities had become a regional brand generating substantial income and employment for multiple families. The success felt like vindication for every woman who'd been dismissed as just a housewife or told that her domestic contributions weren't real work. It proved that professional skills don't disappear during years spent raising children, that creativity and intelligence can flourish even in circumstances that seem to constrain them. Most importantly, Desert Bloom's success had restored my sense of agency and independence that I'd gradually surrendered during years of financial dependence. I was no longer someone who needed permission to make purchases or justification for pursuing interests. I was a business owner, an employer, a financial contributor whose success supported our family's security and future opportunities. Kevin's journey from dismissive husband to supportive partner wasn't linear or guaranteed. Some days were harder than others, as we both adjusted to relationship dynamics that neither of us had anticipated when we married. But his willingness to acknowledge his mistakes and adapt to our changed circumstances created possibilities for rebuilding trust and mutual respect. The grocery store where my card had been declined became a regular stop for purchasing supplies and materials for Desert Bloom's operations. The same cashier who'd witnessed my embarrassment that day now recognized me as a successful local business owner, often asking about new products or sharing compliments from customers who'd purchased Desert Bloom jewelry. Emma and Jake grew up understanding that both parents could be successful professionals, that financial contribution wasn't limited to traditional masculine careers, and that women's work was as valuable and important as men's. Their casual acceptance of my business success provided a foundation for their own future relationships that wouldn't be constrained by outdated assumptions about gender roles and financial responsibility. The woman Kevin had dismissed as just a housewife wasting time had saved their family from financial ruin and built a business that exceeded his career achievements. But more importantly, she had reclaimed her identity, her confidence, and her right to be valued for capabilities that had never disappeared, only been overlooked by someone who'd forgotten how to really see her. The morning everything crystallized. Into perfect clarity came 18 months after that humiliating moment at Desert Hills Market. I was standing in the marble lobby of the Phoenix Financial Center, wearing a tailored burgundy blazer and carrying a leather portfolio containing contracts worth more than Kevin had ever earned in his best year. The elevator carried me to the 32nd floor, where Southwest Home Collection's corporate headquarters occupied an entire level of gleaming offices and conference rooms. Today wasn't just another business meeting. Today was the official announcement of Desert Bloom Designs as Southwest's featured artisan partner for their nationwide spring campaign, a partnership that would place my jewelry in over 400 stores across 12 states. The woman who had once been dismissed as wasting time with crafts was about to sign agreements that would establish her as one of the region's most successful small business owners. Marcus Rivera met me in the reception area, his greeting warm with the respect accorded to valued business partners. "Lisa, congratulations on everything you've accomplished since our first meeting. The fall catalog performance exceeded even our most optimistic projections." His words carried genuine admiration for results that had surprised even Southwest's experienced retail team. The conference room where we'd be signing the expanded partnership agreements was impressive in its scope and formality. Floor to ceiling, windows offered panoramic views of the Phoenix skyline, while the polished mahogany table could seat 20 people comfortably. Today's meeting would include Southwest's regional vice president, their head of artisan partnerships, their legal counsel, and several other executives whose presence indicated the significance they placed on our collaboration. As I took my seat at the table, I couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought me to this moment. 2 years earlier, I'd been sitting in my kitchen surrounded by bills I couldn't pay, listening to my husband dismiss my interests as meaningless hobbies while he made financial decisions without consulting me. Now, I was negotiating million-dollar contracts with retail executives who valued my creative vision and business acumen. The spring campaign partnership represented more than expanded sales opportunities. Southwest was positioning Desert Bloom as the centerpiece of their Authentic Southwest marketing initiative, featuring my story as a local artisan who'd built a successful business while maintaining traditional craftsmanship values. My image would appear in their national advertising, my products would be featured in their flagship stores, and my success would be held up as an example of American entrepreneurship at its finest. The market research we've conducted since launching your fall line has been extraordinary, explained Janet Morrison, Southwest's VP of Retail Operations. Customer satisfaction scores are among the highest we've ever recorded for artisan partnerships. More importantly, repeat purchase rates suggest your customers are becoming loyal brand advocates rather than one-time buyers. The data she presented told a story of success that exceeded typical retail partnerships. Desert Bloom products weren't just selling well, they were creating the kind of customer loyalty that retail companies spent millions trying to achieve. Women weren't just buying my jewelry. They were connecting with the story behind it, the authenticity of handcrafted pieces made by someone who understood their lives and values. We'd like to expand the partnership beyond jewelry, Marcus continued, outlining possibilities that would transform Desert Bloom from a specialized artisan business into a comprehensive lifestyle brand. Home accessories, leather goods, gift items that carry your aesthetic and quality standards. We're talking about building Desert Bloom into a major Southwestern lifestyle brand with national recognition. The scope of what they were proposing was both thrilling and overwhelming. Brand expansion would require hiring additional designers, establishing new supplier relationships, potentially relocating to larger facilities capable of handling dramatically increased production volumes. Success at this level would mean managing dozens of employees and overseeing operations that generated several $million annually. I'm interested in exploring expansion opportunities, I replied, choosing my words carefully to convey enthusiasm while maintaining negotiating leverage. Desert Bloom's core values of quality craftsmanship and authentic design would need to be preserved regardless of scale. Growth is appealing, but not at the expense of what makes the brand distinctive. Janet nodded approvingly at my response. That's exactly the approach we hope to hear. Southwest's artisan partnerships succeed precisely because we support scaling without compromising authenticity. We want to help Desert Bloom grow while maintaining everything that makes your products special. The contract signing took place with a formality that reflected the partnership's significance. Multiple documents establishing exclusive distribution, rights, quality standards, marketing collaborations, and revenue-sharing arrangements that would generate guaranteed income exceeding anything I'd previously imagined possible. The signing bonus alone was larger than our family's annual household expenses before Kevin's employment crisis. As I signed each document, I thought about Kevin waiting at home, probably working in the small office space we'd set up for him to manage Desert Bloom's administrative operations. His transition from dismissive spouse to supportive business partner hadn't been smooth or quick, but his willingness to acknowledge his mistakes and adapt to our changed circumstances had created possibilities for rebuilding our relationship on more equal terms. Kevin's role in Desert Bloom's operations had evolved into something neither of us had anticipated when his crisis first forced us to confront our family's financial realities. His organizational skills and customer service background proved valuable for managing the logistics of our expanded operations, while his experience with sales processes helped streamline our wholesale partnerships and retail relationships. More importantly, working together had required Kevin to fully acknowledge my professional competence in ways that years of marriage hadn't achieved. He couldn't dismiss my business acumen when he was witnessing daily evidence of my strategic thinking, creative problem-solving, and leadership capabilities. Respect that had been gradually eroded over years of financial dependence was being rebuilt through professional collaboration. The personal transformation had been as significant as the business success. The confidence I'd developed through Desert Bloom's growth extended far beyond jewelry design and retail operations. I spoke up more assertively in all areas of our life, made decisions without seeking Kevin's approval, and claimed space for my interests and priorities that I'd previously surrendered to maintain domestic harmony. Emma and Jake had grown up watching their mother evolve from apologetic housewife to successful entrepreneur. Lessons about women's capabilities and potential that would shape their own relationships and career expectations. They understood that both parents could be professionally successful, that financial contribution wasn't limited to traditional masculine careers, and that women's work was as valuable and important as men's achievements. The afternoon following the Southwest signing, I returned home to find Kevin working in our shared office space, managing inventory schedules and coordinating with our production team. The scene would have seemed impossible 2 years earlier, when Kevin's identity was so tied to being our family's sole financial provider that he couldn't imagine scenarios where my contributions might be equally important. "How did the meeting go?" he asked, looking up from spreadsheets displaying production timelines for our spring orders. His interest felt genuine rather than obligatory, reflecting his growing investment in Desert Bloom's success rather than resentment about my professional achievements. "Better than I hoped," I replied, setting my portfolio on the desk and beginning to outline the expanded partnership Southwest had proposed. They want to develop Desert Bloom into a comprehensive lifestyle brand with national distribution. We're talking about growth that would require significant operational expansion. Kevin listened to my description of Southwest's proposal with the focused attention he'd once reserved for his own career opportunities. His questions were strategic and insightful, reflecting genuine understanding of the business decisions involved, rather than skeptical challenges to my judgment. That level of expansion would require hiring additional staff and probably moving to a larger facility, he observed, his tone analytical rather than cautionary. "Do you think Desert Bloom is ready for that kind of scaling, or would it be better to consolidate current success before pursuing major growth?" His question demonstrated the respect for my business judgment that had been missing from our relationship for years. Kevin was consulting me as the decision-making authority, rather than assuming his own opinions should guide our choices. The shift felt both natural and revolutionary, evidence of how completely our dynamic had evolved. "I think we're ready," I said after considering his question seriously. "The brand foundation is solid, our quality systems are scalable, and market demand is clearly sufficient to support expansion. The risk is manageable given Southwest's guaranteed order commitments." Our conversation continued for over an hour, covering operational details, financial projections, and strategic considerations that would have been impossible when Kevin viewed my work as inconsequential hobby crafting. His insights were valuable, his support was genuine, and his respect for my expertise was finally unqualified. The following weeks brought a whirlwind of activity as Desert Bloom prepared for the operational changes required by our expanded Southwest partnership. I interviewed candidates for key positions, toured potential facilities for our new headquarters, and worked with designers to develop product lines that would extend our brand into new categories while maintaining the aesthetic and quality standards that had built our reputation. The most significant decision was hiring Maria Santos, my former virtual assistant, as Desert Bloom's full-time operations manager. Maria's understanding of our systems and commitment to our values made her the ideal person to oversee day-to-day operations while I focused on creative direction and strategic partnerships. "I never imagined when I started helping with your customer service that we'd be planning a facility that employs 15 people," Maria said as we toured a potential warehouse and design space in Scottsdale. "You've built something really extraordinary, Lisa." Not just financially, but the way you've maintained quality and authenticity while scaling operations. Her observation highlighted what I was most proud of about Desert Bloom's growth. Success hadn't required compromising the values and attention to detail that had originally attracted customers. Each piece was still crafted with the same care I'd put into my first Etsy listings, while systems and processes had evolved to support much larger production volumes without sacrificing what made Desert Bloom special. The new facility opened in March with a celebration that felt like a community event. Local business leaders, Southwest executives, employees and their families, and dozens of customers who'd supported Desert Bloom's growth gathered to tour our new headquarters and celebrate what had become a genuine local success story. Kevin played host alongside me, welcoming guests and explaining operational processes with the pride of someone genuinely invested in our shared success. His comfort with his supporting role reflected growth that extended beyond professional adaptation to fundamental changes in how he understood partnership and masculine identity. 2 years ago, I thought my wife was wasting time playing with jewelry, Kevin told a group of visitors during the facility tour. I had no idea she was building what would become our family's most important business asset. Lisa's success taught me that supporting your partner's dreams isn't just about tolerance. It's about recognizing capabilities you might have been blind to. His public acknowledgement of his past dismissiveness and current respect felt like a milestone in our personal recovery from the crisis that had initially threatened our marriage. Kevin wasn't just admitting mistakes, he was claiming ownership of his growth and commitment to our partnership's new foundation. The spring campaign launch exceeded all projections, with Desert Bloom products featured prominently in Southwest's national advertising and achieving sell-through rates that impressed even experienced retail analysts. My jewelry was appearing in magazines, being worn by social media influencers, and generating the kind of brand recognition that money couldn't buy. More personally satisfying was receiving messages from women who connected with Desert Bloom's story and felt inspired by my journey from dismissed housewife to successful entrepreneur. Many shared their own experiences of having interests and capabilities overlooked or minimized, finding hope in evidence that hidden talents could flourish even after years of being undervalued. Your story gives me courage to pursue my own business ideas, wrote one customer from Colorado. If you could build something this successful while being told it was just a hobby, maybe I can turn my passion into something meaningful too. Messages like hers reminded me that Desert Bloom's impact extended beyond financial success to inspiring other women to claim their own potential. The first anniversary of Kevin's employment crisis arrived with a family dinner that felt more like a celebration than a commemoration of difficult times. Emma was thriving in advanced dance programs that Desert Bloom's success had made possible, while Jake was participating in select soccer leagues that our improved financial situation could support. Remember when Dad's bank accounts got frozen and Mom had to pay for groceries with her secret business money? Emma asked over dessert, her tone suggesting the event felt like ancient history rather than recent trauma. That was so scary, but also kind of cool how Mom saved our family. Emma's casual reference to events that had felt catastrophic at the time highlighted how completely our family had recovered from Kevin's crisis. What had seemed like potential disaster had become the catalyst for discovering capabilities and resources that transformed our entire future. Mom's business wasn't secret, Jake corrected his sister with the serious tone he used for important clarifications. Dad just didn't pay attention to how successful it was getting. Right, Mom? His understanding of our family dynamics reflected conversations Kevin and I had made sure to have with both children about learning from mistakes and recognizing each other's contributions. That's right, I agreed, smiling at Kevin across the table. Sometimes people don't see what's right in front of them until circumstances force them to look more carefully. Dad learned to appreciate Mom's work, and Mom learned she was capable of more than she'd realized. Kevin nodded, his expression carrying the comfortable acknowledgement of someone who'd made peace with his past mistakes. Best learning experience. I never want to repeat, he said with the self-deprecating humor that had helped us navigate the most difficult parts of our adjustment process. The conversation continued with plans for our upcoming family vacation to Hawaii, a trip that would have been impossible on Kevin's dealership salary, but was easily affordable with Desert Bloom's success. Emma was excited about snorkeling, Jake was planning to learn surfing, and Kevin was looking forward to a genuine vacation without the financial anxiety that had characterized previous family trips. As I listened to my family planning activities that Desert Bloom's success had made possible, I felt gratitude for the journey that had brought us to this point. The woman who'd been embarrassed at the grocery store checkout had become someone whose business success supported not just survival, but prosperity and opportunity for everyone she loved. The true measure of transformation wasn't the financial success or business recognition, though both were deeply satisfying. The real victory was reclaiming my sense of agency and independence, proving to myself and my family that professional skills and creative intelligence don't disappear during years spent in domestic roles. I'd become someone who didn't need permission to make purchases, justification for pursuing interests, or approval for claiming space and respect. Kevin's journey from dismissive husband to supportive partner wasn't linear or guaranteed, but his willingness to acknowledge mistakes and adapt to changed circumstances had created possibilities for rebuilding trust and mutual respect that were stronger than our original foundation. We'd learned to be partners in ways that honored both our individual capabilities and our shared commitment to family success. The grocery store where my cards had been declined became a regular stop for purchasing supplies and materials for Desert Bloom's operations. The same cashier who'd witnessed my embarrassment now greeted me as a recognized local business owner, often sharing compliments from customers who'd purchased Desert Bloom jewelry or asking about new products featured in Southwest's latest catalog. Desert Bloom Designs had grown from desperate necessity into a multi-million-dollar business that employed dozens of people and generated economic impact throughout our community. But the personal transformation remained more significant than financial success. I'd rediscovered capabilities that had been dormant but never lost, reclaimed confidence that had been gradually eroded, and established independence that would outlast any business success or failure. The woman Kevin had called a housewife wasting time had built something that exceeded his career achievements while saving their family from financial ruin. More importantly, she'd proven that dismissing someone's potential based on their current circumstances is always a mistake, and that hidden talents can flourish even in situations that seem to constrain them. Standing in my beautiful new headquarters, watching employees fulfill orders that would reach customers across the country, I felt the deep satisfaction of someone who'd not only survived crisis, but emerged stronger and more capable than ever before. The secret wasn't that I'd developed new abilities during our family's emergency. The secret was that those abilities had always been there, waiting for circumstances that would finally allow them to be recognized and valued. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.